On March 19, 2013, a police officer arrived at a home in Springville, Erie County, New York, responding to an emergency call. What he encountered was beyond shocking. Lying lifeless on the bed, bruised and bleeding, was 2-year-old Austin Smith. The child had no pulse. His face was covered in marks of violence, and he showed no signs of life. This was not a home where he should have been without proper care. His only blood relative in the house was his 2-month-old brother, Christopher. There were no parents or legal guardians present, only teenagers pretending to navigate adulthood. This case, one of tragic neglect and unchecked aggression, would go on to reveal a story of youthful irresponsibility and a lack of foresight that led to an irreversible loss. The events leading up to Austin's death would expose a volatile relationship, a deeply troubled teenager, and a system that failed to intervene before it was too late. What should have been a safe space for a child turned into a nightmare fueled by immaturity and anger. The tragedy was avoidable, yet no one stepped in until it was too late. The relationship that shouldn't have been the story begins with the tumultuous relationship between 13-year-old Dylan Shoemaker and 16-year-old Ashley Smith. While their age difference was small, their levels of responsibility and maturity were vastly different. Ashley had already experienced significant life changes at just 17 years old. She gave birth to her son, Austin. Dylan, on the other hand, struggled with anger management issues and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He later developed substance abuse problems, leading him to spend time in a rehabilitation center. When Dylan returned from rehab, he resumed his relationship with Ashley. Their connection was built on dysfunction. Arguments, breakups, and reconciliations became routine. Despite their challenges, Dylan was drawn back to Ashley, and by the time he turned 16, she had given birth to another child, Christopher. Dylan took Christopher in as his own, though DNA testing later confirmed he was not the biological father. Their relationship was riddled with immaturity, jealousy, and emotional instability. They both sought adult pleasures, intimacy, cohabitation, and independence without embracing the necessary responsibilities. The fragile foundation of their relationship set the stage for the horrific events that would unfold in March 2013. A home that wasn't a home. Ashley and her children initially lived with her father and stepmother. The arrangement was tense, especially when Ashley's father discovered an unused condom in her bed. Instead of handling the situation with patience or understanding, the discovery led to a heated argument, ultimately ending with Ashley being kicked out of the house. The timing couldn't have been worse. Ashley had a newborn and a toddler, and she was suddenly without a home in the middle of winter. Desperate for a place to stay, she turned to Dylan. Dylan's mother, who had come to consider Christopher her grandson, agreed to let Ashley and the kids move in. It was a moment of compassion, but also one of poor judgment, as neither Dylan nor Ashley were prepared for the responsibilities they were taking on. With Ashley now living in Dylan's home, their dynamic became even more unstable. She took on the role of a working mother, securing a job at a pizzeria with evening shifts. This left Dylan in charge of the children most nights, a responsibility he neither wanted nor was capable of handling properly. As tensions built within the household, the cracks in their situation became more apparent, foreshadowing the tragic night that was soon to come. The breaking point, March 18, 2013, was a pivotal day in Ashley and Dylan's already strained relationship. It began with a seemingly minor argument. Ashley jokingly asked Dylan why he was texting another girl. Instead of brushing it off or explaining, Dylan exploded with rage. What started as a teasing remark quickly escalated into a heated confrontation. Dylan locked himself in the bedroom with Christopher, and Ashley, unwilling to let it go, banged on the door and threatened to call the police. This enraged Dylan even more. He retaliated by threatening to accuse Ashley of sexually abusing a minor if she dared to call law enforcement. The argument turned physical. Ashley shoved Dylan with a pillow, and he responded by throwing her across the bed onto Christopher's toys. This was not an isolated incident, but another example of the toxic, volatile nature of their relationship. Later that evening, Dylan spoke to a neighbor and shockingly referred to Austin with derogatory terms. He openly admitted that he didn't like the toddler, feeling that Ashley spoiled him too much. The animosity he harbored toward Austin would reach its horrifying peak the very next day. The day everything changed, the morning of March 19th, started with another argument. Dylan insisted that Ashley move out, giving her a deadline to leave by the end of the week. Ashley, desperate for a little more time, asked to stay until she received her income tax refund. Reluctantly, Dylan agreed. Ashley had initially planned to stay home that day, but later decided to go to work, leaving the children in Dylan's care. At 4:20 p.m., she left for her shift, unaware that she would never see Austin alive again. Alone with the children, Dylan showed no interest in playing the role of a responsible caregiver. Instead, he became absorbed in texting, messaging friends, attempting to sell illegal substances, and even exchanging intimate messages with a minor. Austin, having woken from his nap, was hungry. Dylan Dylan tried feeding him, but due to an earlier injury, Austin struggled to eat. Frustrated, Dylan lashed out, striking the 2-year-old in the face. But that wasn't the end of his aggression. His frustration turned into an uncontrollable rage, leading him to assault Austin in a brutal manner that no child should ever endure. What followed was an escalation of violence that would ultimately end the little boy's life. A child's final moments as Austin struggled to eat. Dylan's anger spiraled out of control. Instead of exercising patience with the toddler, he reacted with brutal force. He struck Austin repeatedly, leaving the child dazed and disoriented. But Dylan didn't stop there. His rage continued to build, and he subjected the 2-year-old to further physical abuse. Witnesses later testified that Austin had already sustained injuries before this tragic day, raising questions about whether Dylan had hurt him before. However, on March 19th, the violence escalated beyond anything Austin had ever experienced. At some point, Austin fell unconscious. His tiny body had taken too much trauma, and his fragile frame could no longer endure the pain. Panicked, Dylan tried to revive him, shaking him and calling his name, but Austin didn't respond. His breathing became shallow, his pulse weak. Dylan finally realized the severity of what he had done, but instead of immediately calling for help, he hesitated. He waited precious minutes, perhaps hoping Austin would regain consciousness on his own. It wasn't until Austin had stopped breathing entirely that Dylan finally contacted his mother, who then called 911. When emergency responders arrived, they found Austin lifeless, his small face covered in bruises and blood. Attempts to revive him failed. He had already succumbed to his injuries. The horror of the situation was undeniable. A helpless toddler, entrusted to the care of an irresponsible and violent teenager, had paid the ultimate price for someone else's recklessness. The unconvincing lies as soon as the authorities arrived. Dylan's instincts kicked in, not to take responsibility but to lie. He quickly spun a story, attempting to frame Austin's death as an accident. According to Dylan, Austin had fallen off the couch and hit his head, but his injuries told a different story, one of prolonged abuse and deliberate violence. Austin's face and body were covered in bruises. His injuries were far too severe to have been caused by a simple fall. The medical examiner would later confirm that Austin suffered from blunt force trauma to the head and abdomen, consistent with being punched or beaten. Yet Dylan, in an effort to evade responsibility, stuck to his story. As investigators questioned him further, Dylan tried to appear remorseful. He cried, insisted he never meant to hurt Austin, and even attempted to play the victim. But his behavior wasn't consistent with genuine grief. It was more in line with someone trying to manipulate the situation. Dylan wanted to avoid consequences, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Ashley, upon learning what had happened, was devastated. She had left her children with someone she trusted, someone she believed was capable of watching over them. Instead, she returned home to find her son dead and her boyfriend trying to cover up the crime. What followed was a series of interrogations, a deeply emotional court case, and a trial that would expose the full extent of Dylan's violent nature. The chilling courtroom confession, despite his initial lies, the weight of the evidence against Dylan became too much to ignore. Eventually, he confessed, but even in his admission, he downplayed his actions. He claimed that he hadn't meant to kill Austin, that he had simply lost control. But the court saw through his attempts to minimize his guilt. During his sentencing, a chilling moment occurred. Dylan, believing no one was listening, leaned over to his attorney and whispered, "I'm a 16-year-old kid. None of this is going to matter." It was a shocking display of arrogance and lack of remorse. The comment, captured on video, immediately went viral. It painted a picture of a teenager who didn't fully grasp or didn't care about the gravity of what he had done. Dylan's words enraged the public and the courtroom alike. This was not the statement of a remorseful young man. It was the chilling mindset of someone who believed he could escape justice because of his age. The prosecution wasted no time using this against him. It became one of the defining moments of the trial, solidifying Dylan's image as a dangerous and unrepentant killer. The sentencing injustice served. Dylan Shoemaker was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder. Given his age, he could not receive a life sentence without parole, but the judge ensured he faced severe consequences. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, a punishment that ensured he would spend the majority of his life behind bars. During the sentencing, the judge made it clear that Dylan's actions were inexcusable. He condemned the teenager for his blatant disregard for human life and his repeated attempts to avoid responsibility. While some in the courtroom argued that Dylan's young age should be considered, the judge emphasized that age was not an excuse for murder. For Ashley, the sentencing brought mixed emotions. She had lost her son, and no amount of prison time could ever bring him back. She also had to live with the guilt of trusting Dylan and of leaving her children in his care. But at the very least, she had the small comfort of knowing that Austin's killer would not walk free anytime soon. A system that failed to intervene as the case unfolded. Many began to ask, could Austin's death have been prevented? The warning signs were there. Dylan had a history of anger issues, violent outbursts, and reckless behavior. He had been in and out of rehabilitation programs, yet no one had truly stepped in to address the deeper issues at play. Moreover, Ashley and Dylan's relationship was far from healthy. They were two teenagers playing house, neither mature enough to handle the responsibilities of raising children. Social services had been involved in their lives before, yet there was no intervention strong enough to protect Austin from harm. In hindsight, multiple people failed Austin, Dylan's mother, who allowed Ashley and the children to move in despite Dylan's violent past. Ashley, who ignored red flags and continued to trust Dylan with her kids. In the broader system, which did not take necessary steps to remove Austin from a dangerous situation. This was a failure at multiple levels, and in the end, an innocent child paid the price. Remembering Austin Smith at the heart of this story is a child who never got the chance to grow up. Austin Smith was just 2 years old when his life was taken. He had no ability to defend himself, no way to escape the abuse he endured. Those who knew Austin described him as a happy, playful child, one who loved to laugh, explore, and spend time with his mother and baby brother. His death was not just a tragedy, it was a preventable loss that should have never happened. Though Dylan Shoemaker sits behind bars, serving his sentence, justice does not erase the pain left behind. Austin's short life serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, of speaking up when we see danger, and of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. May we never forget Austin Smith, and may his story continue to serve as a lesson for generations to come.